Živijo vsem skupaj, upam, da še unika Katijo pridemo noter. Zdaj nadaljujemo z Paulom Repujem, on je izvršni direktor organizacije Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. To je v bistvu organizacija, mednarodna organizacija preiskovalnih novinarjev, ki se ukvarjajo z čezmejnimi zgodbami. Tako da predajem besedo Paulu.
Okay, hi, wow, slow. So, yeah, my name is Paul Radu, and I'm an investigative reporter. I run this network called the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. We work in many countries. Some of you here in Slovenia are members of this organization, but we mostly operate in Central Eastern Europe, as well as in Mexico, North Africa, and other parts of the world. And obviously what we do is we investigate crime and corruption. And we investigate high-level organized crime and corruption. We do the sort of investigations that are not usually done by the law enforcement, by the police of a country, by the intelligence agencies of our countries. Because it's not possible for them to do these sort of investigations many times. And I will give you some examples later about this. But I'm supposed to talk about journalism without borders, which sounds a little bit like, medicines without frontiers, or medics without frontiers, and all that, The truth is that whatever we see in terms of high-level corruption and organized crime around us is that it's all cross-border. There is no corrupt official here in Slovenia, or in my country, in Romania, or elsewhere in the world, that only operate inside the country whenever they want to use their corrupt money. So when you have a corrupt deal that usually flows across many frontiers, because these people need to hide their money, they need to hide their interests in various dirty deals, they need to use offshore companies, they need to connect to criminal groups, and so on. So this is if we talk about corrupt officials. If we talk about criminals, about outright criminals, the kind of mobsters, that we see sometimes in movies, the kind of organized crime groups that we see, operating out of Mexico, like the Zeta drug cartel, the Sinaloa, or the Gulf drug cartel, or Russian organized crime, or Romanian organized crime, or whatever organized crime group. These are also groups that operate across many frontiers. They don't just operate inside the country. They operate, in many countries. Now, what happens at the global level is that you have these guys, that easily operate across many borders, and then you have the police on this other hand. Now you have the police, the secret service, you have the prosecution and other, law enforcement agencies that are meant to fight this crime. But my question is, how can you fight the crime when you're local? The police in Slovenia is paid with your money, right? You're paying for the salaries of the cops. And the cops are supposed to protect you. In exchange for that money, they have the duty to the society to protect you, to investigate for you, to expose wrongdoing, and to arrest people, to bust people. But imagine what happens when the people that they need to investigate are people that operate across many borders. How is a group that is confined to national borders going to expose and investigate a group that operates, from Slovenia all the way to Colombia, for instance, or to Mexico, or to Iran, or to whatever other country? It's actually not quite possible to do so, to investigate for law enforcement. Of course, you say, oh, but there are international structures such as Interpol. Interpol is an organization where we exchange information, But think about this scenario. There's a criminal group that operates between the United States. So some of the members of the criminal group are in the United States, and some of the members are in Iran or in Russia. Do you see the law enforcement in the United States cooperating with the law enforcement in Iran against an organized crime group? They don't have relationships. They don't have political relationships. They won't cooperate. Do you see North Korea assisting any other country in fighting or exposing this criminal group operating across borders? This is not happening again. But guess what? Us as journalists, for us it's very easy to cooperate across borders. It takes very little time, not as much effort, to become part of cross-border networks where we can expose criminals that operate across borders, where we can expose our corrupt officials in our countries by going across borders and tracking the money and tracking the traces abroad. Because again, when we're talking about cross-border and corruption, this mostly happens because people don't trust the place where they steal from. So if someone steals from here in Slovenia, he or she will probably not deposit the money, the loot, in the same place. They will probably go to a place where they think that their money is secure. It's in a safe, in a bank vault somewhere where they know that they will get it back. So I have in mind countries like Switzerland, for instance, or the United States, or the UK. These countries where there's a very well-established financial system. These are the countries where these people are going to deposit their money. Because the moment they stole from an environment like this, they will know that their money is not safe if they put the money back in that environment, because there's always other people like that. This is why being part of investigative reporting networks is crucial right now. If we want to investigate properly local issues, we can't limit our reporting to national borders. We have to go across borders, and we have to cooperate with journalists all over the world. I'll give you a little bit of an example of the environment that is created for the past 2 years around the world when it comes to investigative reporting. So I'll give you a brief overview of this. Probably some of you are aware of this organization. It's the Global Investigative Journalists Network. We actually just had a big global meeting in Rio, in Brazil, in October. This groups together investigative journalists from many countries. Let me show you a map here. All these are investigative reporting organizations. You see lots of these are here in Europe. There is just one listed in Africa, but this is an organization called FAIR, where you have lots of other groups, from all over Africa. You have quite a few, in the US, and this is and a few in Latin America. This is part of a new trend, a trend that started a few years back, when investigative reporters, because of various reasons, because of corruption in newsrooms, because of lack of interest from mainstream media outlets, in this type of reporting, cross-border reporting, or investigative reporting, because of the need to be independent and to do some good work, some fair work, they started organizing themselves into not-for-profits for investigative reporting. So these centers for investigative journalism. It all started, years and years ago, with the first center of investigative reporting in San Francisco, in the U.S. The center, it's actually called like the CIR, the Center for Investigative Reporting. Then from there, there were other centers established worldwide. One of the first ones was a center, for instance, in the Philippines, that was run by a friend, by Sheila Coronel, and so on. But right now you have a mushrooming of centers for investigative reporting all over the world. And these are grouped under the umbrella of the Global Investigative Journalists Network. And then what we also have in this environment is regional groups. So for instance, I'm running such a group, as I mentioned before, the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, where we operate across this region here, all the way from Russia to Albania, let's say, and with some operations also abroad, like in Mexico. But the thing is, OCCRP is a gathering of centers for investigative reporting, as well as some media outlets. For instance, our partner in Russia is Novaya Gazeta, which is a newspaper based in Moscow. Our partner in Ukraine is one newspaper based in Kyiv Post, as well as other centers for investigative reporting in the country. So you have all this mix, between not-for-profits, and then you have these, sometimes newspapers, sometimes TV stations that are members in these networks. In the Arab world, you have Arish, which is the Arab Reporters for Investigative Journalism. This is what Arish stands for. Arish is an organization that covers lots of the Arab countries. And again, in some cases it's independent, some freelancers, in some cases it's investigative media outlets and so on. In Latin America, you have quite a few. Actually, that region is very, very vivid. Right now we have a lot of these investigative reporting centers created there. I'm training journalists, in all these countries. So, for instance, I was training one of these networks recently in Panama. They gathered, there were journalists from Central America, journalists from other countries in Latin America, and they gathered in Panama to start some cross-border projects, just as we, gathered here, in Ljubljana, just to try to ignite a little bit more of this investigative work. Now, why actually do all this? Why create all these networks? How can you take advantage of these networks? How can your public, which is ultimately what we all want, take advantage of these networks? Well, one of the reasons is that by operating in networks, you can prevent crime. This is, in my view, something really, really important. Traditionally, investigative reporting was about telling the story after the wrongdoing happened. It's like, okay, so there was this privatization process and it went wrong and some people profited from this, or this armed deal, that took place 2 years ago, and now we're investigating it and exposing, the criminals behind it or the corrupt politicians. That's fine. That's fine. But that is the old type of journalism where we got, a glimpse of what was going on at some point in time, and we're starting, digging for that and digging and uncovering something that is, of course, worth it. I mean, this type of journalism should be there. But imagine, that we can actually do much more than that. We can prevent crime. We can be efficient against crime in the sense that, crime in itself and corruption in itself is not a very diverse business. If you look at, at crime, you see that there are these many ways to perform crime. There are thousands of crime models. There's money stolen from banks, there's privatizations that are rigged, there's drug trafficking, there's trafficking in persons. So there are a few types of crime. If you analyze, criminal behavior behind these crimes, you'll find that you'll see patterns, and you'll see that the same crime model is applied over and over again in various geographical areas. So once you're able to identify this pattern, let's think about the 90s, for instance. In the 90s there was this trend, with pyramidal schemes and these sort of Ponzi schemes and pyramidal schemes where people were promised lots of money. They would invest just a bit and they would get 10 times more. And this was applied all over the world. But country by country, the same criminal, the same crime model. And guess what? People fell for that. People fell for that big time. Although it was already happening in different parts of the world, They couldn't just see the pattern. They couldn't just see what was going on. I just gave earlier in my workshop this example, just to highlight how you can beat pre-crime. I was awaiting a friend of mine on the Bucharest airport, and he rushed up, out of these airport gates, and he told me, "Paul, you wouldn't believe what I saw in the plane." My friend was coming from Moldova, from Chisinau, Moldova, and so he was coming from Chisinau, Moldova to Bucharest. This is a small plane; it's a short trip, and he told me there were in the business class, where there were only like 4 seats. Being a small plane, there were these 3 guys, all of them behind big financial fraud in Romania. Big. One of them was a former MP, the first member of the parliament in Romania convicted to jail for fraud. He stole $60 million worth of money from a Romanian state-owned bank, and he was convicted to 3 years in jail. He only did 1.5, and no money was ever recovered. So 60 million. Another guy was involved in a fraud almost 100 million. The third one was involved again in lots of millions worth of fraud. And nobody knew that these guys even knew each other, because these were disparate facts, things, crimes. They were doing this in separate parts of Romania, and nobody knew that they were ever connected. Now, them coming from Chisinau told us that they must have some business there in Moldova. So we just went to the register of companies of Moldova, we searched their names, and we found out that they just opened up these new companies together with the wife of the head of one of the most important secret services in Moldova, and also with the former Minister of Internal Affairs. So they created these companies, and what they wanted to do, they wanted to do a bingo game on TV, on the Moldovan national TV. But the thing was that the same bingo game, they applied it 3 times this scam in Romania, and it was all these 3 times was like it resulted in big fraud. People not getting paid, and the TV stations losing lots of money because of these TV televised games. What we did was we found out this information and we exposed them before they were able to start operating in the Republic of Moldova. They were in the process to deal with the national TV to have it, to have these bingo games on TV. What we did was we presented their past, that they applied already this criminal scheme. We never said that they're going to apply this criminal scheme again because we can't foresee the future. It's impossible. But what we did was we exposed them, they created this structure, and where they associated themselves with powerful Moldovans, wife of the head of the Secret Service and so on. And we gave people a choice. The Moldovans had a choice. Are we going to let these people operate, or are we going to cut this business deal? And they chose to cut the business deal. As a result, the guys called us. Of course, whenever you report on someone, you must have a dialogue with these people. So we exposed them and all that, and they called us and they said, "You are worse than the police. You ruined our business. You're ruining our lives," and this sort of stuff, And we were happy because we think we prevented crime from happening. So this is what we can do the moment we do efficient investigative reporting. And what I just told right now was not efficient reporting. Because this is, it just happened that I was on the airport and my friend was in that plane and he saw them. So it was just, this lucky moment, let's say. But we can learn something from this in the sense that what if we would have taken, and this is what we're doing right now, what if we would take all the names of controversial businessmen in a country, all the names of the members of the parliament in a country, and we run them through databases without, expecting to meet them somewhere on an airport. Guess what? If we would have run already the names of the MP that came on the airport and all these other guys, we would have found their phone companies. And we would be able, then to follow the money and to tell the story, even without getting lucky. So this is what we learned from this story. What we're doing now is we're doing a lot of phishing through databases. So that means we take lots of names, all the names of the members of the parliament in Ljubljana, all the names of the members of these guys and those guys, and we run them through databases to find their commercial interests, their business interests, because that's where the money is, that's where the corruption is. So, for doing this sort of work, we're cooperating quite a bit with hackers, and I'm talking about civic hackers. We're cooperating with artists that are, that help us shape up the information, create infographics, and put the information in a way so that the public understands. And we also cooperate with activists, which is going to be like, oh, wait, journalists and activists, that's a little bit of, you can't do that, right? But what we're aiming for is, there's so much corruption around us and so little investigators that we need to cope new people in our business. We need to share skills. We need to teach them how to investigate. Otherwise, we'll always expose some wrongdoings and perhaps sometimes just prevent some stuff from happening, but without being truly efficient. In my opinion, journalists this far has been. We would be journalists, we would pick a story that we like, we would expose that, and we would think, this is great. We did this great work, And it's true. It's true. The story has always worked, and it's always worth going for this. But if you look at the good that we're doing for the society in this way, it's kind of limited. And this is something that we can change by working in networks, collaborating across borders, and embedding a lot of technology, a lot of tech in our work. Imagine a system where, you'd input the names of all your people of interest, as we call them, all your MPs, so a website, there you go, you open it up, you pour in all the names, you just copy them from a document, all the names of the parliamentarians, all the names of troops in the country, and you run them at once via registers of companies, court records, and other types of records, land registries all over the world. Can you imagine such a system giving you real-time information on, okay, is the prime minister of this country having owning some hidden businesses elsewhere in the world? Is his MP owning some company with which he got back in the country some contracts? This is possible, and this is what we're moving towards right now. By scraping lots of databases, by indexing lots of this information, and by creating systems where there's that we can use in order to make some intelligent guesses and intelligent searches. Imagine this system would be, it would be quite easy to identify patterns. I was mentioning before that there are many types of crimes, as there are many types of how criminals hide their money or how they launder their money. If a corrupt politician would like to get some money from a rigged deal, from a bad deal for your country, they would like to buy some new things with that. They would like to buy some property, some luxury cars, some stuff, or to put some money in a bank abroad. But again, ultimately the goal would be to use that money. Very little people just are happy with having the money in the bank account. They want to feel the money in some way. So it's always like that. It's always going to the usual places in order to investigate this money and these people. You have to investigate in New York, for instance, where they love to buy property. You have to investigate in London. You have to investigate in Zurich. You have to investigate, on the French coast, Côte d'Azur. You have to investigate in Spain, in really nice places where they love to live. Where they love to have their yacht anchored. And in order to investigate this, you need the network. Now, I will introduce you to a tool that you can all use in order to investigate networks. And it's called the investigative dashboard. I will show you two tools actually. One of them is the investigative dashboard, which this is the new iteration of the investigative dashboard. We launched it in New York. We developed it, this second iteration, together with Google Ideas in New York. And this is something that should help investigators of all kinds. Again, we are all for cooperating with activists because we believe that the evidence that we'll gather as investigative reporters should be used, for a good cause. So we're helping them, in evidence-based activist processes. You probably heard a lot about, conspiracy theories, and you see all these people, that tell you, oh, the government is always mafia, and all this, it's not quite like that. We don't believe in that. We believe that if you generalize like that, you actually lose the main point here, that you have to pinpoint to who's guilty for that particular crime. Sometimes it's a system, but the system itself is made of humans, So just saying all the government is corrupt, it's not enough. You have to actually find what part of the government is corrupt and who's behind all that. So you have to get down to the company and ultimately to find out who are the humans behind the crime. And this is something that we're trying to do with the investigative dashboard. So, for instance, here this has three parts. One part, is where we index a lot of the data, data from registers of companies, data from courts, and so on. And this is growing and growing and growing. And this is where we are also cooperating with other initiatives such as Open Corporates. You can't really see, right? So basically these places where we index, pour in lots of data, and you can input the name there in the search field and search, see if a person has a company elsewhere in the world, you know, or here you can put the name of the company and search for it. The second part of the investigative dashboard is a place where we're indexing lots of data sources. So this is a gathering of worldwide databases. So for instance, just gave this example earlier, Panama, you know, Panama is one of the offshore havens of choice for lots of people, you know, to hide their companies and their money and stuff. And here you have, for instance, two choices. One is the public registry of Panama. You just click on the link, you know, and it will take you to the public registry of Panama, where you can search for company data. And the other one is a scraped registry of Panama. So this is how we're processing information right now. You know, some of these databases, you know, all over the world you have these e-government efforts, open government efforts, you know. There's a lot of data that is put online. But the truth is that a lot of this data is not put online because people want to be open, but because someone is forcing them, because they you know, sign these open data partnerships and all that. Then lots of times the information is not indexed properly. You can't really use the data in investigative reporting. So for instance, in the case of the Panama Registry of Companies, you can only use it if you know the name of the company that you're looking for. If you don't know the name of the company, and if you want to search for a person, you can't do this. But then this is where cooperation with programmers may come very handy. So this is the same registry of companies, Panama, just created by a hacker, by a colleague of mine by the name Dan O'Higgin. So he's created, and he created this new interface where you can actually search by the name of a person. Let's see if we can. So for instance, I put here the name of the president of Azerbaijan. His name is Ilham Aliyev. And we'll find that there are quite a few hits with Aliyev, you know, Nur Aliyev, Alim Aliyev. But there's three persons here that are of interest to us. For instance, Leila Aliyeva and Arzu Aliyeva, these are the daughters of the president of Azerbaijan. And the third is the wife, Mehriban Aliyeva. If we search this, we'll find out that they own quite a few companies in Panama. And of course, now we have the name of the company, and we can go to the official register of companies of Panama, and we can get the official records on that. So this is, you know, so there are ways to process the information, to shape the information so that it helps you in your cross-border reporting. If you check these companies, you know, from Panama, you find out that the family of the president of Azerbaijan is using them for hidden investments back in the country, gold fields, telecom companies, and so on and so on. So this is how these people operate, you know, they shield themselves from public scrutiny by putting layers in between themselves and the investment that they make, you know, worldwide. So this is easy to find out once you operate in a network, once you work with the journalists from Panama, for instance, once you work with journalists from elsewhere, and this is doable via the Global Investigative Journalists Network right now, and once you use technology in your work. And I mean, it's very important to be organized, and the moment you identify a crime pattern, to be sure that that crime pattern is applied over and over again. You know, the other thing we've seen quite a bit was you know, we're investigating organized crime and corruption for many years, and we would investigate all sorts of deals. You know, this corrupt deal here, this corrupt deal there, like the privatization of an industrial asset here, privatization of an oil company here. You know, some banking fraud there, and what we saw was there were always elements in common. For instance, usage of offshore companies, Cyprus-based offshore companies. So what we realized was that we were not efficient because we were investigating in the wrong place. What we needed to investigate was the crime infrastructure. How come you always have these offshore companies involved? What does that tell you? Well, there's a trend to use offshore companies, right? Now, guess what? Such offshore schemes, such very complicated structures involving companies from all over the world, you know, mixed companies, sandwich companies, and all this, it's not very easy to create these structures. There's always a few people behind these sort of structures. For instance, I'd say that in Ljubljana, there's probably a few lawyers that are able to establish. So probably a handful of lawyers that are able to establish these complicated structures that can be used by crooked politicians or by criminals in order to launder their money, to hide their money, to hide their interest in various businesses. So once you identify those people, now you have access to their infrastructure. And we've done this in quite a few cases. And once you investigate the infrastructure, it's much easier then to see what's going on that infrastructure. So you won't just investigate that deal and that deal. You will see all the deals at once. This is the same when we investigate across borders. So, for instance, right after the Arab Spring, in Egypt, I was in Cairo with my colleague, and we were giving this workshop for Egyptian journalists on how to follow the money cross borders. It was a 3-day workshop. But what I believe in when I go to a workshop like this, as I did this morning with your colleagues, is you have to share method, you have to share databases, and you also have to share information. So, and this is something, if you're willing, we have some data sets that we can give you, data sets about all the Slovenian citizens that have companies in Switzerland and in the United Kingdom. Maybe there's something interesting there. So we have these data sets. If you're interested in those, you can ask me for those. We did the same for the Egyptian journalists, and we gave them all the Egyptian citizens with companies in Switzerland and the UK. And of course, to me, the data didn't tell nothing. I had no idea. There were lots of Egyptian names there, but I didn't know who they were. But the moment I gave this information to the Egyptians, they were looking and saying, "Wow, wait, this was the right hand of the former president, Mubarak. This was this, this was this." So they found very interesting names there. So this for them was a very good start for the investigative work. So sharing information that doesn't tell you much, information has different values in different geographies. We're investigating right now some banking fraud in Moldova that is, for instance, connected to some Slovenian companies here, via other companies in Russia and so on and so on. It's to you this sort of information here would not tell much, except if you have the context, if you have the local context. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that technology will help us, and the network will help us, as long as we cooperate with people on the ground. I will not be able, although, I'm doing investigative reporting for quite a number of years and I'm familiar with lots of types of criminal schemes, I will not be able to come here to Ljubljana and to be more efficient than an investigative reporter from here. Because I don't have the contacts, I don't know the place and all that. But if I would work with an investigative reporter from here and I would exchange the information that I got at the higher level of the network with the local level here, that would be powerful investigative work. So the idea is to go across borders, and this is why this talk was titled Journalists Without Frontier, is because this will give us new opportunities, and this will give us the chance to create new journalism and to actually make a difference, and to also cooperate with others. And investigative reporters are usually reluctant to share their information because it's their story. But when you're talking about cross-border stories, it's really not possible to keep the story for yourself, and it's not efficient either. And we have to change this. It used to be that the journalist was the lightning rod, where all the information would come, and then he or she would choose, okay, so tomorrow I'll write about this, and the day after tomorrow about this, and I'll offer the public this and that. Times have changed, and I think the value that we have right now has changed, in the sense that what we are right now is we are people that can see the game in its entirety, but we have to work with others in order to get that information. We're not anymore those nodes where all the information is covered, We are, we see WikiLeaks, we see lots of activists doing investigative reporting, and that's good actually. That's good for us as well. Because guess what? I'm sharing all this information and how to, know about investigating offshores and all that. And I want people to use these tools. But people will turn to you whenever they will get a story and say, can we add some more to it? Can we add some more layers to this story? So you always get a story in return. So it's not like you're giving away your tools and you're done, you're obsolete. It's never like this, you know. So it's actually always paying off to share tools and all this, because there's so much work out there. Yeah. So I have just 5 minutes. Do you have any question at this point? Please.
Hey Paul, one of the stories that was basically one of the highlights of cooperation between journalists was the horse meat scandal, where also CRP obviously played a huge role. Now, could you give us some of your insight on the story?
The horse meat story was a story that had kind of European kind of exposure and stuff. And I mean, obviously started with some Greeks eating some lasagna that contained horse meat instead of beef and all that. But again, it again comes down to investigating in a network. Because the scandal was, you know, horse instead of beef. The true scandal, though, was much different. Was that, you know, there's a secrecy network. There's a network that operates in secret all across Eastern Europe. And this secret network puts food on our plates. That is the real story behind this. So you have, you know, the smaller story with the horse meat, but when we started investigating, we looked again at the system behind it. And we found out that in this case, the exports of horse meat were done via a Cyprus-based company. And it's really, I mean, I know that here in Slovenia you're running into Cyprus companies, you know, quite often when you're investigating deep. And it's easy right now to get a Cyprus company like that. It costs 10 euros from the official registered company of Cyprus, you know, you get a record. But, you know, so we found out the Cyprus company that was behind all these exports. Actually, the company was called Drap Trading, which is, you know, Drap is the reverse of paard. Paard in Dutch means horse. You know, so it was even transparent from the name that, you know, this company was dealing in horse. And this comes to these criminals being creative. So don't think about criminals about being some dumb people. Some of these guys are brilliant. They could have been the next Bill Gates or whatever, you know. But they just chose, you know, to be involved in crime. You know, some of these guys make fun of us, make a lot of fun of us. They're not serious all the time. You know, they're playful, they're creative, they're very, very interesting characters. So in this case, we discovered the Cyprus company, you know, behind these exports. The company in Cyprus was owned by another company based in the British Virgin Islands. And the company in the British Virgin Islands then was involved in all sorts of other shady deals, not only this horse meat scandal, but for instance some privatizations that were quite controversial of steel mills in Ukraine, or shipments of weapons to African countries, illegal shipments of weapons. So the same people behind, you know, the horse meat, you know, they were involved in a lot more than that. And the danger in this case was, and that's why we exposed the network, was, okay, right now it was just some Brits, you know, complaining about horse being shot for beef, actually the other way. But in some other cases, it might be something that is tainted, some food that is poisonous. Some people might die because of some bad food, you know. And who would you blame? The offshore company in Cyprus, the offshore company in the British Virgin Islands. So you see, the thing with this is to reveal what's going on underneath, not just to investigate, you know, a particular issue, but to see how the system works, to try to prevent, you know, such things from happening in the future. So I hope this kind of answered your question. Any other question? Any other concern about global networks? Do you know how to become members of a global network? Of the Global Network for Investigative Reporters? How many of you are members of the Global Investigative Journalists Network? Just one. So this, you know, this network is quite open actually to journalists. And should I go back to the website? So you just go to the website of the Global Investigative Journalists Network, just Google it, and you can become members, and then you have access to this, at least to the emailing list, where you have, you know, colleagues from all over the world that you can ask for data. Let's say there's a company from Ukraine coming to invest in Slovenia. You can ask for data about the company from Ukraine, from your Ukrainian colleagues, and they will be able to give you the information and so on. So cooperation is always paying off. You know, cooperation is always creating new journalism and exposing wrongdoing. So if there aren't any other questions, I think I'll stop here, and thank you.